Erev Tov. We have a very, very fascinating and typical lesson today by the Rebbe. The question is a very, very interesting question, and the answer is an answer that it's very typical to the way that the Rebbe is teaching us almost every week how to look on the stories of the Torah. So it begins actually with the story of the spies, the Meraglim, that we have just had. And we know that the whole story of the Meraglim was that
Meraglim is spies, rabbis.
Spies, yes. Thank you, Safta. So the whole story with the Meraglim, the whole scene of the Meraglim was that they actually didn't want to go to the land of Israel for whatever reason. In Hasidus, it's explained that they were on a very, this is what we learned, that they were on a very lofty, high spiritual level, and they did not want that, which was the desert with all the miracles that we have experienced there was perfect, the perfect environment for them. And therefore, they did not want to go to the land of Israel. Okay, so what do we see? It's a story that Moshe Rabbeinu is sending spies, and so what they saw, what they reported back was not a problem, because this is what they were sent. They were sent by Moshe Rabbeinu to report on what's going on in the land of Israel. The problem was where they took it into a conclusion. Not only they say what they saw in the land of Israel, but they came to the conclusion saying, we will not be able to conquer the land. And that was their mistake. They should have come and say, we went, we saw, these are the fruits of the land, all those details, this is what they were, their job was. Their mistake was that they added on top of it their own self-conclusion, which was obviously, like every conclusion, it had their own self-interests, their own view, their own point of view. And they did not want to go to the land of Israel to begin with, because they didn't want to be involved in all the materialistic physical world, like plowing, sowing, etc. They wanted to remain in the clouds of the desert, study Torah all day. So that took them to the misconclusion of saying that we will not be able to conquer the land, to the point where Rashi say that when the spies are saying, because they are stronger than us, ki chazak u mimenu, so Rashi says mimenu, they refer to God, saying that the inhabitants of the land of Israel at the time, the Canaanites, the Yevusites, the Hivites, whatever, they are stronger than God, and God is not, won't be able to conquer the land and give us this land, and therefore it's better to stay in the desert, or even, go back to Egypt. Now, very interestingly, in this week Torah portion, which is PARSHAT CHUKAT, which mostly discussed the red heifer, but there is also another case of spies, where Moshe Rabbeinu sent spies. And here too, those spies that Moshe Rabbeinu is sending, here again, they do something on their own opinion, without getting instructions to do it. And then at the end of the parsha, we have a major story with the 2.5 tribes, Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, v'chatzi shevet Menashe, the tribe of Gad, Reuven, and half of the tribe Menashe, where they don't want to go to Israel. They want to reside in the east portion, the east side of the Jordan River. They don't want to go to the land of Israel, which is similar to the spies who did not want to go to the land of Israel. And we'll see how the correspondence between them and Moshe Rabbeinu, and why those two stories, the spies that Moshe Rabbeinu sent in this week Torah portion, and the story of the 2.5 tribes at the end of the parsha has no connection. Not only it's not the same problem of the original spies, but on the contrary, which led me to wrote to you on the WhatsApp message that today we're going to learn how to come out from a failure stronger and smarter. And actually, okay, we'll discuss it later. Let me share the screen. 1 second, please. And okay, do you see it? Do you see the screen? Okay, now it comes up, no?
Yes, Rabbi, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. I don't know, the computer is very slow. And no, it's not slow, but it's not moving. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Okay, let's go back. And this is from, again, this is from this week Torah portion. Let's start with the verses of where Moshe Rabbeinu sent those spies. Let's see. Chenji, source number 1 from this week Torah portion.
The spies to Yazer. Israel settled in the land of Amorites. Moshe sent men to scout out Yazer, and they captured its villages, driving out the Amorites who lived there. Rashi. Moshe sent men to scout out Yazer. The spies captured it. They said, "We will not act like the first ones. We are confident in the power of Moshe's prayer to fight." Midrash Tanchuma.
Okay. Let's see actually the Midrash Tanchuma, which tell us the behind the scene of what has happened. Let's see it.
Israel settled in the land of Amorites. Yazer remained, so Moshe sent scouts to spy there. Those scouts were ambitious, saying, "We are confident in the power of Moshe's prayer. He already sent spies earlier who failed and brought tragedy. We will not repeat that mistake. We will remain loyal to God and fight." They did so and killed the Amorites.
Okay, so this is on the way to the land of Israel. There is the Amorites there, and one of these cities where they settling, it's called Yazer. And Moshe Rabbeinu actually sent spies to scout the land, and those, they're not only coming back with information, like a typical spy is doing, but they come back and they say, mission accomplished. We already finished the job. We killed them, we captured the land already. They not only came up with what is the plan, but they executed the plan. Why? Because they trusted, they had confidence in the prayer, in the power of prayer of Moshe Rabbeinu. But here comes the Rebbe's question on this. Let's see, Chenji, please.
This is very surprising. How could it be that when Moshe sent spies to the city of Yazer, they not only spied out the land, but went so far as to conquer it? In other words, they added to the mission Moshe gave them on their own initiative. For an agent to stray from the instructions they were given is a betrayal of the mission. Didn't they learn their lesson? What's even more astonishing is that this happened after they had already seen what happened with the first group of spies Moshe had sent.
Yeah, and just to refresh our mind, what happened with the first group of spies Moshe had sent in the previous Torah portion. So let's go and visit again the story of what happened with them. Source number 2, Chenji, please.
They told him and said, "We came to the land to which you sent us, and it's flowing with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who inhabit the land are mighty, and the cities are extremely huge and fortified. And there we saw even the offspring of the giant. The Amalekites dwell in the southern land, while the Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountainous region. The Canaanites dwell on the coast and alongside the Jordan. We are unable to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we."
Yeah, and as I said before, what is stronger than we? So Rashi explained that they came to such a misconclusion that they are even stronger than God, and therefore conquering the land is not possible. Okay, so and as I said in the introduction to the class, they're saying that the land is flowing with milk and showing the fruits, and this was part of their mission. What was not part of the mission is their conclusion is, however, the people who inhabit the land are mighty, and their conclusion, we are unable to go against that people, for they are stronger than we. Let's see how the Rebbe builds up the question, which is on this Torah portion, which again, we have the same story with spies who are taking their own initiative. Here, it's not to come to a conclusion that we won't be able to conquer the land of Israel, but to come to a conclusion that not only will scout the land, but we will also conquer it. So let's see the question in detail, how the Rebbe lays it. Yes.
The entire mistake of the original spies was that they added to the mission they had been given. Moshe had only sent them to scout the land, to assess the best route for conquering it. So when they reported, however, the people living in the land are strong and the cities are large and fortified, that was actually part of their assignment, to observe whether the inhabitants lived in open camps or fortified cities. But their mistake was in going further and drawing their own conclusion. We will not be able to go up.
Yeah. And you remember what is the gift that we all got thanks to this mistake, right? What is the gift? Roaming in the desert for 40 years. Yeah. And these are the same people, right? This is 40 years after. I'm sure this was a hot topic. Sorry. I'm sure it was a hot topic among the Jews. Nobody forgot the original spies because everybody paid 39 years of roaming in the desert for this. And let's see how the Rebbe puts it down.
This was the sin that led to their punishment. They were sentenced to spend 40 years in the desert, 1 year for each of the 40 days they had spent scouting the land. However, due to God's mercy, the first year they had spent in the desert before the spies had even been sent was included in the count, so they wouldn't have to remain in the wilderness for 41 years. And yet, despite all this, the second group of spies, the ones in this week's portions, once again added something on their own initiative.
So that leads us to understand that there's something behind that conclusion, and it's not a typical mistake that like similar to what the initial spies did. Let's see the Rebbe's explanation on this. Fascinating explanation.
Good intentions. From this very fact, it is clear that the scouts sent to Yazer must have had good intentions, especially since the generation of Moshe is referred to as a generation of knowledge, and they were undoubtedly very closely connected to him and deeply influenced by him. The spark of Moshe that exists in every individual throughout the generation has an influence on them, enabling them to live with awe of God. How much more so would Moshe himself have influenced the people of his own generation?
Yep. So let's see if so it's a quote from let's say first source number 3, which is a very, very, very interesting optional section, and then we'll discuss it. I'll explain it. Source number 3, it's again from the Torah. Yes.
And now, O Israel, what does your God ask of you? Only to fear your God, to walk in all his ways and to love him, and to worship your God with all your heart and with all your soul, to keep the commandments of God and his statutes, which I command you this day for your good.
Okay, so if you look at the text over here, yeah, what does God ask of you? So what is of you? Right, from each one of us. And then he only asks us to fear God, walk in his ways, and love him, and worship him, and do it with all of our hearts. Only, like similarly to what they say in India, I'll come after 2 hours only, right? It's not only, it's a big deal. And God says here in the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu says, that what does Hashem ask from you? Only this. What do you mean only? People can live a life of 100 years. trying and not getting to that level. And here you say, Moshe Rabbeinu says only. That's question that the Talmud asks in Tractate Brachot. And the Talmud answers that yes, for Moshe Rabbeinu, it was only. Right? For Moshe Rabbeinu to love God and to fear God, it wasn't a big deal because Moshe Rabbeinu's spirituality and his closeness with God was so intense that it wasn't a big deal. So then the Alter Rebbe asked, what do you mean? What's the answer? What's the Talmud answer? The Talmud says, it's a big deal. How can you say only? And then the Talmud says, it's for Moshe Rabbeinu. For Moshe Rabbeinu, it was only. But then what's the connection to me? What's the connection to you? What's the connection to everybody here in 2025 that it was easy for Moshe Rabbeinu? For me, it's a huge deal. So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya a very fascinating idea. The Alter Rebbe explained in Tanya that every one of us has a little Moshe in him. And that little Moshe within each one of us that is embedded within our soul, for that little Moshe, loving God and fearing God, it's as is only. It's not a big deal. Now, our job is to set the table that portion of Moshe, which is within me, will lead the entire me. Will not just be a portion, a spark of Moshe within me, but it will be, that spark will get more and more and more energy until it leads the entire me. Okay? So Moshe Rabbeinu, in other words, has an influence up until 2025, that each one of us, the fear and the love, and fear and love, it's basically the two emotions that are the basic fundamental emotions for every service to God, right? We do all the Torah, all the mitzvot, everything we do in our relationship with God, it's a result of these two emotions, fear and love. That all, it's influenced by Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, if in 2025, more than almost 3,500 years after Moshe Rabbeinu physically departed from this world, is still influencing me and you, that we have the ability to have fear and love to Hashem, so how much more the generation that lived together with Moshe Rabbeinu, right? The generation of knowledge, they were influenced by Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu influence of every generation, it's huge influence. So how much more on his own generation, that the generation that spoke with Moshe Rabbeinu every day, that Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't just a picture on the wall, but Moshe Rabbeinu was their leader. How much more was the influence that Moshe Rabbeinu had on this? So now, based on this explanation, the Rebbe will explain how come that these spies that Moshe Rabbeinu sent to Yazer, they take such a bold action and they don't learn from the history. And they do take the initiative and they conquer the land, the city of Yazer, and they killed all the Amorites. So let's see the Rebbe's answers to it.
Rectifying the spies' sin. The explanation is as follows. Rashi writes, they said, we will not act like the first ones. We are confident in the power of Moshe's prayer to fight. It's clear from this that the spies Moshe sent to explore Yazer were trying to correct the mistake made by the earlier group of spies. And a true correction must come in the very same area where the original failure took place.
That's important. The true correction must come in the place of the failure. Okay? And this is a key to understand here. And what's the correction?
In this case, since the sin of the first spies was that they deviated from their mission by adding something negative, saying we cannot go up, the spies sent to Yazer countered this by also adding something, but in a positive way. They said, We are confident in the power of Moshe's prayer to fight, and they went on to actually conquer the land.
So the problem of the first spies was their own conclusion. They concluded and they added something from their own initiative to conclude with, and they made a massive mistake that cost us 40 years in the desert for all of Am Israel, and an entire generation who came out of Egypt who died and remained in the desert. So these spies who now learn from the history, not only that they don't learn from the history, they learn from the history and they said, okay, we gotta correct that problem itself. What was the problem? The problem was taking your own initiative and doing something negative with it. We will take our own initiative because we trust Moshe Rabbeinu. We are confident in the prayer, in the power, in the prayer, and the mission that Moshe Rabbeinu gave to us. So now we're going to use our own initiative to conquer, not only to conclude the mission that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us, but we're going to add on top of it, and we're going to go and actually conquer the land with the prayer of Moshe Rabbeinu. So what do we see here? That they not only they did learn from they learned from the past, but they went all the way to correct the original mistake of the past. Similarly, the Rebbe will now apply the same concept to another story in almost the end of the parasha. In the end of the parasha, the story of the tribe of Gad, Reuven, and half tribe of Menashe. 2.5 tribes out of the 13 tribes. Let's see what is the story that brought down in the end of this parasha.
While live outside Israel, the descendants of Reuven and Gad had an abundance of livestock, very numerous, and they saw the land of Yazer and the land of Gilead. And behold, the place was a place for livestock. The descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben came and spoke to Moshe and to Eleazar the Kohen and to the princes of the community, saying, the land that God struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. They said, if it pleases you, let this land be given to your servants as a heritage. Do not take us across the Jordan.
What is across the Jordan?
Israel.
The promised land. So what is technically these people are saying? The people of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, Reuben, and half of Menashe, they come to Moshe and they says, please, Moshe, we don't want to go to the land of Israel. What is Moshe's reaction? Let's see Moshe's reaction.
Thereupon, Moshe said to the descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben, shall your brethren go to war while you stay here? Why do you discourage the children of Israel from crossing over to the land which God has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. They went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, and they discouraged the children of Israel from crossing into the land which God has given them. The anger of God flared against Israel, and he made them wander in the desert for 40 years, until the entire generation who had done evil in the eyes of God had died out.
Yeah, that's the story, the original story of the spies, right? And Moshe continues.
And behold, you have now risen in place of your fathers as a society of sinful people to add to the wrathful anger of God against Israel. If you turn away from following him, he will leave you in the desert again, and you will destroy this entire people.
Okay, so this is Moshe responds to these guys saying, well, I mean, you parents have done the same. And you know the result. You know that they all wiped out, they all died in the desert. So why are you now doing the same thing, saying we don't want to go to the land of Israel? We want to stay in the eastern part of in the eastern bank of the. They say to Moshe Rabbeinu, no. They approach them and says, yes.
We will build sheepfold for our livestock here and cities for our children. We will then arm ourselves quickly and go before the children of Israel until we have brought them to their place. Our children will reside in the fortified cities on account of the inhabitants of the land. We shall not return to our homes until each of the children of Israel has taken possession of his inheritance.
So what basically they say to Moshe Rabbeinu, no, we don't want to discourage the people to go to Israel. We will go together with them, not only with them, but we will go in front of them. We're going to be in the front of all the wars, and only until all the other tribes of Israel, they will take their possession in the land of Israel, then we will go back to this side of the Jordan River. And then what is Moshe responds?
Moshe gave the descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben and half the tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the land together with its cities within borders, the cities of the surrounding territories.
So basically, Moshe Rabbeinu agrees. And by the way, you know how many years it took to conquer all the land of Israel? So this tribe of Gad, Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh, they, as they promised, they were first to go to the land of Israel to fight all the wars, and they only gotten back to their families and to their life at the east side of the Jordan River bank, only when the whole job was concluded, and that took 14 years. The time to conquer the land of Israel by Joshua took 14 years. So for 14 years, they were fighting in the front, and they became big warriors. There's a lot of stories in the prophets about it, in the book of Joshua. There's a lot of stories about it, but it took 14 years. But here comes the Rebbe with a question. Let's see the question by the Rebbe.
Still, this raises a question. In the portion of Matot, we are told that after the regions of Yazer and Gilead were conquered, the tribes of Gad, Reuben, and half the tribe of Manasseh came forward and asked to settle there. Moshe initially responded by comparing them to the first group of spies, saying, "Behold, you have risen in place of your fathers, a society of sinful people." At first glance, this is hard to understand. In many verses, where God promises Moshe that the Jewish people will enter the land of Israel, it is spelled out that the land being referred to is a land of Canaan, which is west of the Jordan River.
Yeah, so it was very clear that what's the promised land? The promised land is west to the Jordan River, what we call today Israel. So the Rebbe asked this question, given that,
how could it be that the tribes of Gad and Reuben wanted to settle in the territory of Sihon and Og, which lies east of the Jordan? The entire Jewish nation knew that God wanted to give them the land of Canaan, which is on the western side of the Jordan.
How is it even possible that they ask for it? Why did they have the desire to go and reside not in the land of Israel? Where is it coming from? So of course they had their answer, right? They had the flocks, they had a lot of sheep, and they said this is a perfect land for it. Okay, but here the Rebbe asked on top of it.
Moreover, the request made of the tribes of Gad and Reuben, "Don't take us across the Jordan," echoes the very same error as that of the original spies who did not want to enter the land of Canaan. How could it be that, knowing fully well the terrible consequences of that earlier mistakes, these tribes would also ask, "Don't take us across the Jordan"?
And this is exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu argues against them, right? This is what Moshe Rabbeinu tells them. How can you come down? Your forefathers have done the same. And you know the result. But what the Torah explains, yes?
The Torah explains that the tribes of Reuben and Gad had large herds and saw that the land was suitable for livestock.
Yeah. What do you say? What the Rebbe will ask about it? For a livestock, you're willing to give up the promised land that Hashem is giving you for 2 cows and I don't know what. This is it. This is life. Life is all about a livestock. Let's see the word of the Rebbe.
This is why they said, this is a land for livestock and your servants have livestock. But this isn't enough to explain their conduct. Could it be that for the sake of their animals, they were willing to give up something so much greater, the opportunity to themselves, their wives, and their children to enter the land of Israel? Prioritizing the needs of livestock over the well-being of people goes against the basic logic. This is all the more so when we are talking about the generation of knowledge, the generation of Moshe. What's even more astonishing is that in the end, Moshe agreed to their request and allowed them to remain on the other side of the Jordan.
So that leads us to an understanding that there must be something else to the story. There must be another level to this whole story of the tribe of Gad and Reuben and half of Menashe that is beneath the surface, and that explains everything and makes a lot of sense. And this is what the Rebbe will explain to us.
Repairing the sin of the generation. The explanation, which is a straightforward explanation, and therefore surely the correct one, is as follows.
By the way, this is the Rebbe says this is a straightforward explanation, and therefore surely the correct one is because this question, unlike many other questions, does not have many good answers. So the Rebbe says the fact that there is no good answers to it must be that the explanation is, it should be a very simple explanation. Okay, so now what's the simple explanation?
The generation in question was all complete and ready to enter the land after the punishment brought on by the sin of the spies had been complete. That being the case, they certainly would have been extremely careful not to repeat, God forbid, the mistake made by their parents who remained in the desert. Rather, their intention was to correct the sin of the generation that had refused to enter the land,
which is their forefathers, their uncles, their aunts, this generation. So it must be that their intention was to correct the previous mistake, the mistake of the history. Very similar to what we said about the spies who went to the city of Yazer and decided to conquer the land. Now, what's the explanation over here? The Rebbe will explain.
In the covenant between the parts, God promised Abraham that he would give his descendants the land of Israel, including the lands of Kenizzites and Kadmonites, all of the 10 nations at once. Abraham certainly passed that promise on to his children and descendants after him.
Okay, so how many we have here? 10. Let's see the verse inside. Source number 5. This is from the time of the covenant between God to Avraham Avinu when we were formed and we were promised the promised land, the land of Israel. Okay, so let's count how many, what's the land? How big is it? Whose land is it?
On that day, God formed a covenant with Abraham saying, to your seed I have given this land, from the river of Egypt until the great river, the Euphrates River, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, and the Kadmonites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Rephaim, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites.
So all together, if we count them, we have 10. Okay? God is promising Avraham Avinu, I will give you land, I will give you descendants, the land of these 10 people, 10 nations. But Rashi comes there and explain immediately that there is a difference. That's it.
The Kenites. There are 10 nations enumerated here, but he gave them only 7 nations. The other 3 are Edom, Moab, and Ammon, and they are referred to here as the Kenites, the Kenizzites, and the Kadmonites, which they will inherit in the future.
In the future. Because when Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the Jews about the land of Israel, he only mentioned 7 out of the 10 nations. Not the complete promise of Avraham Avinu, but a majority of it. 7 out of 10 is a nice number, but it's not the complete picture. There are still land which Moshe Rabbeinu did not intend to give the Jews at the time that they entered the land of Israel, which God did promise to Avraham Avinu. Let's see it inside.
However, in all of Moshe's speeches to the people of Israel, he never mentioned all 10 lands. The reason is that the full inheritance of all 10 lands, including the territories of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, and the Carbonites, is something that will take place in the Messianic era.
Okay, and let's see in the promise of Moshe, in the speeches of Moshe Rabbeinu, where Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the Jews and tells them where I'm going to take you. Let's see.
When your God brings you to the land to which you are coming to possess it, he will cast away many nations from before you: the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. 7 nations more numerous and powerful than you.
And that's the promise. 7 nations, Hashem will conquer them and will give them to you. All those people who came out of Egypt. But what happened with the other 3? The other 3, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't promise them, because the other 3, this is going to be when Mashiach is going to come. By the way, this is one of the proofs that of Mashiach in the Torah. Okay, because Mashiach is not clearly mentioned in the Torah. And one of the proofs of Mashiach in the Torah, it's this fact that we are still, Moshe Rabbeinu only gave us 7 out of 10, and there are still 3 to go. Okay, so who's going to bring those 3? At the coming of Mashiach, Am Israel will, the promised land will expand to the original promise of Avraham, God to Avraham Avinu, and that original promise will be fulfilled not by Moshe Rabbeinu, but that original promise will be fulfilled by Mashiach. Okay, let's see. Here we have a map that shows what are this is the Menashes, this is the Jordan River. You see, this is Kinneret, the Galilee Sea, and this is Dead Sea. Okay, by the way, this is the original, according to most opinions, this is the original land of Israel. This is how it was distributed to all the tribes. Okay, you see, this is half of Menashe, this is the second half of Menashe, this is Gad, this is Reuven, this is Judah, this is Dan, this is Ephraim, here is Shimon, Issachar, Zvulun, Naphtali, and Asher. And here you have Binyamin, where inside you have little bit small Yerushalayim, which Yerushalayim was not distributed to any, was not inherited to any of the tribes, but it was a common city, belongs to everyone together. Okay, so here is the clear picture. This was originally a place of 7 nations, and the other 3 nations, they reside over here. Now, based on this explanation, the Rebbe explained the initiative and the intention of Menashe, Reuven, and Gad, who asked to stay at the east side of the Jordan River. Let's see.
We can explain that the intention of the tribes of Gad and Reuben in choosing to settle on the eastern side of the Jordan was to hasten and advance the complete inheritance of the land, not just the territory of the 7 nations, but all 10 that were originally promised. They hoped to achieve this by having part of the people settle not only in the land of Canaan, west of the Jordan, but also on the eastern side of the Jordan.
So basically, they knew, let me go back to the picture, to the map. They knew that the promise, they knew that the promise of Hashem to Avraham Avinu, which will only be fulfilled at the time of Mashiach, is this whole thing. And now, Moshe Rabbeinu's intention is only to give us this part, okay, west of the Jordan River. but they wanted the complete redemption. They did not want to satisfied. They weren't satisfied just with the shorter, the smaller version of the land of Israel. They wanted the entire version of the land of Israel, including the promise, the future promised land. And what's the conclusion is, this is what the Rebbe takes from it.
From this perspective, their aim was actually to correct the sin of the generation of the desert, who had refused to enter the land by doing something similar in form, but entirely positive in content. Just as the generation of the desert had not wanted to enter the land of Canaan because of the spies' negative report, so too these tribes expressed a reluctance to enter the land of Canaan. However, they did so for a positive reason, to help bring about the complete inheritance of the land, not only with the land of Canaan, the 7 nations, but also with the initial conquest and settlement of the territories that belong to the 10 nations promised to Abraham.
So you see the flip. They are the same, their claim was the same claim, right? They also didn't want to go to the land of Israel. But to which land of Israel? To the minor land of Israel. They wanted to go to the complete land of Israel. Why? Because the original spies did not like Israel. But these guys, the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, the tribe of Gad, Reuven, and half of tribe Menashe, they wanted not only Israel in the smaller form, but they wanted the entire land, even the future promised land. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu, as soon as Moshe Rabbeinu discussed it with them, and he says, what are you? Are you like the fathers? They said, no. We are not afraid to go to the land of Israel. We will go. We will fight. The reason why we want to stay in the other side is because that part is to the promised land of Israel, the future promised land of Israel. And we don't want to wait for the future. We want the future now. And it can be suggested this is the Rebbe's idea built on top of it. Yes.
It can be suggested that this added a new dimension and completeness to the conquest and the inheritance of the land, that already in the time of Moshe, a beginning and preparation was made for the future, when the full promise would be fulfilled, the inheritance of all 10 nations. This is why Moshe ultimately agreed to their request and gave them the eastern side of the Jordan, even though it was technically outside the borders of the land of Israel as defined at that time. Their settling in the eastern territories added a new dimension and completeness to the entire mission of conquering and inheriting the land as a whole,
including the future of what we will be, the reversing the other 3 nations, the eastern side, the eastern bank of the Jordan River completely will be at the time of Mashiach. But they wanted to begin with this. They didn't want to wait until it's going to happen. And that in another place the Rebbe explains that this adds the dimension of Moshe Rabbeinu himself being residing already in a portion of the land of Israel. Because Moshe Rabbeinu died he was at the Jordan River, but he was at the Jordan River from the eastern side. But if the Jordan River of the eastern side is already a portion of the land of Israel, that makes this already a conquer that was made partially by Moshe Rabbeinu and connects Moshe Rabbeinu to the land of Israel and makes the future redemption, Mashiach, not only a nice theory or something good to pray for, but it makes it something that already started 3,300 years ago by the beginning of the conquerment of the land of the other 3 nations that were promised to Avraham Avinu that will be in the future, will be at the time of Mashiach. That process has already begun in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. That was the class. Let's see the key points. Yes.
After most of the Amorite cities were conquered, Moshe sent spies to Yazer with the intention of capturing it. The spies take independent initiative and successfully conquer the city. The Rebbe asks, why did the spies add a task on their own initiative, especially when this was the very failure of the original spies, who went beyond that mandate and added conclusions they weren't asked to? The explanation: the spies' actions show that they came with the intent to correct the sin of the original spies. Whereas the first group overstepped their mission in a negative way, these spies did so in a positive way. Trusting in Moshe and conquering Yazer, true rectification happens in the very area where the original damage occurred.
Okay. Tribe of God.
The tribes of Gad and Reuben, who had large herds of livestock, requested to settle outside the promised land on the eastern side of the Jordan. Moshe ultimately agreed. The Rebbe asked, why would these tribes refuse to inherit the promised land? This seems to echo the sins of the spies who refused to enter the land. And why would Moshe agree to this? God's full promise to Abraham included the lands of the Canaanites, Kenizzites, and Carbonites, territories to be inherited in the future, in the time of redemption. The intent of the tribes of Gad and Reuben was to hasten the fulfillment of this divine promise by settling the eastern side of the Jordan now. In doing so, they were correcting the sin of the spies. This is why Moshe agreed to their request.
And what takes us? What's the takeaway? Very, very crucial and very, very important takeaway. Only for those who have failures. I don't know everyone in the group here, but as someone who has failures from time to time, few times a day, that's a very, very crucial takeaway.
Sometimes we shy away from returning to places where we have already failed. A failed attempt, a mistake we made, a choice that turned out to be wrong. All of these can leave us afraid to try again. But this week's Torah portion teaches us something deep. True repair doesn't come by fleeing from where we are wrong. It comes by returning to that very place, but with a new approach, pure intention, and inner faith. What was once a failure can become a success if this time we come from a place of connection, honesty, and purpose. Sometimes the path forward goes right through the past, but with a new perspective and a whole heart.
Wow. Amazing. And if I may say that, one second, let me stop the screen share. This was the end of the class. Thank you very much. But if I may add that the whole purpose of the failure, right? The failure has also a purpose. God created that failure. Yes, it was our free choice that led us sometimes to failures, but that failure too is a creation of God. And God created the failure for a purpose, for a reason. If we do not learn from the failure to and get and correct it, so then what's the purpose of the whole failure? So these two lessons that we get from these spies and from the tribes of Menashe and Avraham is exactly Menashe and Gad, Reuven, Gad, and half Menashe. It's exactly that point. We have to treasure everything that Hashem sends our way, not only what we see as good, but even things that we see as a failure. And true, they are a failure. But this failure is only for us to learn from it, to gain the momentum, the clarity, whatever. Go back, see what was the mistake, and learn from it. I heard a very, very nice story which belongs to the part of stories that may have happened. Did I tell you this joke? There is 3 types of stories: stories that happen, stories that never happen, and stories that may have happened. So this is from the story that may have happened of a big high-tech company that one of their department made a massive mistake and made a huge loss. One of the product was lost or something, millions of dollars. The next morning, the CEO of the company calls the head of this department. And the head of the department knows what's about to happen. So he packs up all his stuff, he puts it in his bag, and, with a deadly face, he goes to the meeting. And he goes into the big boss office, and the big boss asked him, okay, so what's the next project? He's looking at him and says, he was speechless. What do you mean next project? Like, says, what are we doing now? Says, what do you mean? I thought this is my goodbye meeting.
Last one.
And he says to him, I just invested few $1 million in your education. And you want to go now to another company? So that is true also to us. Hashem is investing so much energy in us. If we do not take this energy that was a failure and learn from it and grow from it, so it was a real failure. And we have the opportunity, we have the wisdom that Hashem is embedding. It takes time, right? Not always it's easy. Sometimes you go back to your failure, you only fail, you're failing more. You need to be connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? You need to be from a generation of knowledge. You need to be connected to the Moshe Rabbeinu within you that will will throw light and guide you and direct you to where you need to go. You need to pray. You need to connect to God. You need to give charity. You need to do all those things that are within your reach. You need to ask for guidance, but then don't be afraid of it. Use it as a shooting point to the next heights, Be'ezrat Hashem. Thank you very, very much. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. You can ask in the comment or in the, let me just stop the recording.